All right, so good afternoon, HSLA members. If someone could take over admitting folks, because I do not have eyes on the screen right now, that'd be great. As you know by now, I am managing the training today on behalf of Captain Maynard Harper. She had a previous commitment and was unable to attend today, but so before we start on the wonderful content today, I did want to make a few announcements that Captain Maynard Harper did provide. First, the recording from our last session is available on the HSLA's YouTube channel. I will put the link in the chat later on. I'm not going to do it now because I'm not very good at multitasking. Secondly, the next HSLA session is on the 18th of April, so hopefully we all can join at the right spot again. And thirdly and finally, we planning for the next cohort of the HSLA needs to begin soon. So if you're interested in serving on the next planning group, I know I'm personally super excited to have the opportunity. Please send me your contact information and I'll set up a meeting to discuss and designate the leadership and all that going forward. So before I go into Commander Muni's bio, are there any questions? Not seeing any hands, or let me just double check the chat. All right, looks good. All right. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Commander Mike Muni. Commander Muni is the Supervisory Strategic Communications Lead in the ICE Health Service Corps, or IHSC, Communications Unit, where he leads 4 communication specialists and oversees the development, facilitation, and dissemination of strategic communications across multiple platforms for internal and external audiences. Since joining IHSC in August 2022, Commander Muni manages content for IHSC websites, designs SharePoint pages, develops marketing materials, analyzes the effectiveness of communication strategy, and he also directed the agency's overview video, which is now available on www.ice.gov, YouTube, and the USA Jobs website. Commander Muni has over 20 years of public affairs experience, which includes work used by CNN, USA Today, Washington Post, and the New York Times. Additional highlights include supporting President Obama's America's leadership in the fight against Ebola speech, creating OASH, OSG, and ASPR social media posts, and developing content for the Commission Corps headquarters websites. He served as the keynote or guest speaker of 14 conferences in 6 states and the District of Columbia to audiences ranging from 50 to over 2,000. Prior to his 13 PHS deployments as a public information officer in federal service, Commander Muni worked as a cold case homicide detective, giving interviews with local newspapers, live and pre-recorded televised interviews, and live talk radio. Commander Muni was formally trained in communications by Duke University and the North Carolina Criminal Justice Academy. He holds a Bachelor's of Science, Master's of Public Administration, Master of Public Health, and certificates from Cornell and Duke University. Prior to his current role, Commander Muni worked as the Chief of Communications for Commission Corps Headquarters, a senior public health analyst at the Health Resources and Service Administration, and the liaison to the White House for the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration. Before PHS, Commander Muni was the DoD Civil Service Drug Demand Reduction Coordinator at Camp Lejeune. Prior to federal service, Commander Muni was a law enforcement officer for over 10 years, which included working as a cold case homicide investigator and as a Special Operations Division undercover narcotics detective at the Jacksonville Police Department in southeastern North Carolina. Commander Muni also served 1 tour of duty as an active duty enlisted Marine. He's done a lot. So welcome today, Commander Muni. It's nice to see you again. Please take it away.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You know, it's always weird when you hear somebody say your bio out loud. It just it reminds me how old I am and that I clearly never knew what I wanted to do when I grew up, right? I kept bouncing around trying to do a lot of stuff until I finally found myself making a full-time career out of something that's I've always been really passionate about, which is communications. And I don't think any of us have ever had a situation where you went to some sort of think tank meeting at your agency, whether in the private sector or the government sector. And it always seems to, when you're identifying what the issues is, communications always seems to be on the list. It always seemed to be that one red flag, no matter what the problem was with the product, or with the strategic approach at the agency, or dealing with a complaint coming from the public. There was always some sort of connection to how we need to communicate better. And I could never seem to run away from it. And I realized that, I had the experience and I had the education background for communications, and I should probably just stop avoiding it and just embrace it and do it full time. And that's what I'm doing now. And I'm really excited to talk to you about today. Before we go any further, though, I'm going to share my slide deck with you. I might need a little bit of help because I want to make sure I don't lose the chat box. I say that because I really want to be able to see the chat box while we do this today. So just give me a second. Let me make sure I do this right. Hopefully I don't lose the chat box. If so, I might need one of y'all to hold my hand to do this the right way.
I can help you get the chat box back, but it should stay up on the screen.
I want to be able to still see the chat box. That's what I'm worried about.
So if you're not familiar with Teams, you should see a white box up at the top. Oh, did we lose you? Hopefully he's still there.
Give it a second.
There's like a white box or a rectangle with an arrow next to the leave button. That's the share the screen.
Yep.
And then
Yep.
you can either share your screen or.
Yeah, I got that part. I want to make sure
Okay.
I just share. I want to be able to just share my PowerPoint so I can still see the chat boxes. I have to be able to see everybody's responses.
Yeah, so let's get the slide deck up first and make sure you click share. All right, and then on your screen, sir, do you still see the meeting chat over on the right-hand side?
Yep.
Okay, so make sure you just put yourself in presentation mode, please.
One more try. Thank you for your patience. I'll get through this. Okay. I'll give you. All right.
There you
Can
go.
everybody see the slide deck?
Roger.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now give me one more second because I still can't see the chat box.
So go back to your Teams and you can make sure that there's a blue line under the chat up at the top that should open the chat box in Teams itself. Or likewise, you could open your Microsoft Teams application and have the chat showing up there if you click on the right channel. So you can have either the Teams on one monitor and your presentation on the other, or have the chat running alongside your presentation in Teams. Or I can just monitor the chat for you and interrupt you unceremoniously.
I have to contact me. One more second. All right. Can you still see my slide deck?
We can. It's in like it's not in presentation mode.
All right. Let's just keep rolling with it. You can just let me know what's in the chat box. How about that? I don't want to waste any more time.
I will, sir.
There we go. Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, so why am I making such a big deal about this chat box? Because I don't want to talk to you. I want to talk with you, right? This has to be engaging. It's one of the most effective ways to communicate is when you're not talking at somebody, but you're talking with them, right? And you make someone part of the conversation. That's when engagement starts. That's when that bridge first occurs with the connection. And that's why I want to be able to make sure that we do it this way. So first and foremost, a lot of times when you hear people speak, you hear about how they want to cover 10 to 15 things. That's a lot, especially now, right? We live off these phones. They go everywhere with us. And unfortunately, even when we're in cohorts like us, where education levels and intellect levels are extremely high, attention levels still decrease, right? And it's hard to keep people's attention. And we get distracted by a lot of things. Like right now, we're not all in a physical room sitting around a table where I could kind of give you the stink eye if you're picking up your phone and staring at it while I'm talking to you, right? I can't see that. I'm actually at a table right now completely by myself. And all I can do is just hope that I can keep engaged with you. And one of the ways that I can do that is by making sure that this is a conversation, right? That it's that dynamic part of communication where it's two-way, right? Where I'm sending information, but I'm also receiving information. It's the basics of interpersonal communication. So one of the ways that we're going to also focus on this today is I'm only going to cover three things. Why only three? Well, if you think about somebody that is running for office and you see them on the television, they don't get on there and say, I have a 75-point plan I'm going to share with you. People don't do that, right? They try to cover 3, 5, maybe 7 if they're feeling really risky, 7 things. I'm not feeling risky today. I mean, you just saw I can't even handle bringing a chat box up, right? So I'm going to keep it at 3 because I know 3 is that good number. It's that solid number that when you're talking to a group of people or even just one individual, if you're trying to get a point across, keep it simple, right? So we're going to have 3 takeaways today. We're going to talk about the big picture and how to use it. We're going to talk about making the pitch. And then we're going to talk about my favorite thing, which is communicating strategically, right? I mean, the name strategic and the name communication is in the title of the work that I do for a living. So I'm really passionate about strategic communications, but we got to lead up to that. Okay. This is probably the last slide before you're going to have to start interacting with me. So enjoy this. Okay. So using the big picture, what are we talking about here? The big picture. Well, what do you think this is? Big picture. Well, we're going to talk about it and we're going to break it down by 3 things. We're going to identify what the big picture is. We're going to make sure we understand what a big picture is. And then most importantly is you have to know how to use a big picture, right? It doesn't make any sense to go through all the work of identifying something and understanding it, and then it just sits on a shelf. Now we're in the government. I know that never happens, right? Everything that we put together, it never ends up on a shelf. It's always used, right? Well, I can't tell you that's always the case, but I can tell you today that when we talk about the big picture, we're going to make sure you understand how to use the big picture. And by doing that, I'll even provide an example of that. Okay. Here we go. I told you you weren't going to be able to go much longer without having to interact with me. So if you don't like using a chat box, you can just turn your microphone on if you want to talk. I'm fine with that too. It's just I wanted to make sure I gave everybody the easy button if you'd rather just type. However, I know some of you are like, really? I type all day. I didn't come here to type. I came here to talk. And I'm fine with that too. So in the chat box, or if you turn on your mic and you want to just verbalize it, what do you think the 3 main components are at an agency's big picture? Now, don't get in the weeds and say, well, at my agency, they're this, this, and this, and it's different from another agency. We're not talking about that. We're talking about big picture, right? So whether you work at FDA, you work at CDC, if you work at ICE Health Service Corps, if you work at HRSA or SAMHSA, right, or DOD, or Commission Corps headquarters, every agency, or if you just came from the private sector not too long ago and you want to reflect on that too, even the private sector companies have this too. What do you think the big picture is? What are those 3 components? Does anyone have any ideas?
All right, we're getting a few in. We have mission, vision, and ... meeting the mission, people, place, performance, mission, values, policy, vision, mission, and values, and mission, vision, and values.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah, I mean, for many of us in the room, you know, we've been in the federal service for a while, right? And many of us have even gone to different agencies, right? And that's something that you notice when you go to a different agency is each agency has a mission, it has a vision, and it has those core values, right? And so those kind of are those layers to the onion when peeled back that gives you an idea what the big picture is to an agency. So, yep, y'all got it right. Vision, mission, and core values. Well, you're not done. I'm going to have to get you to interact with me a little bit more. Let's take a couple minutes right? Fortunately, we're all on computers. That's the one nice thing right now about not being at this table with me that I'm looking at that's completely empty around me. You all have your computers, and you probably know how to use them much better than I do. So I want you to go to your agency's website, and I want you to pull up your vision, mission, and core values. Now, some of you probably have them memorized, but if not, that's okay. I want to make sure you know how to find them. And I have a feeling that there's a good possibility that even after today, after this little exercise we're doing, you'll rely on them again if you don't already. Some of you probably already have them somewhere saved and you can quickly pull them up. So if you would, go ahead and find your agency's vision, mission, and core values. I'll give you about 30 seconds. Okay, if you guys can just give some thumbs up, that way the individual helping me can let me know that there's some reactions. People have been able to find it already.
So far, we have BOP and CDC.
Okay.
I can get the FDA one for you if you want, but there's a lot of text there.
That's okay. I just want to make sure y'all can find it and that you have it. I know some of you are probably like, really? Are we really doing this exercise right now? Just want you to bear with me. I just want you to respect the process here. We're going somewhere here.
Got VA, DOD, I think HRSA, I'm not completely sure. VA.
And what you
I
find?
added a blurb for FDA, Margaret.
Yeah, some of you might be hunting right now and you're like, oh my goodness, it's like a whole page. Right?
Coast Guard and NIH to add to the mix there.
Okay, great. That's awesome. Okay. So why are we doing this? Well, for starters, you're in a leadership academy. So that means you're already a leader or you're preparing to be a leader, right? And if you really want to communicate with impact, you have to be able to speak like a leader. And what that means is when you do speak, whether it's about apples, bananas, or oranges at your agency, it has to be aligned with the big picture of your agency. And if you don't know your mission, if you don't know your core values, and if you don't know the vision, I'm not saying you're going to fail, but what I am saying is there's going to be a disconnect. Remember, we talked a little bit before about we want to be able to engage when we communicate and have that ability to build that bridge and to connect with the person that we're talking to. It's that whole sending and receiving information. Well, it really starts with being able to, if you want to speak like a leader and you want to talk to a leader as a leader, be able to understand what the big picture is for your agency, right? Because that's the direction that your agency is going in, isn't it?
That's true. Yeah.
Okay. So here's mine. I work at the ICE Health Service Corps. Here's our vision to be the best healthcare delivery system in detention and correctional healthcare. What's our mission? We want to provide the safe delivery of high quality healthcare to those in ICE custody. And what are our core values? Integrity, commitment, accountability, service, and excellence. Now, do I have all this memorized? No. Do I refer to it? Absolutely. On a regular basis? Yeah, probably more than many because I work in comms, right? And so you might be like, well, of course, that's a no-brainer. You're going to look at this more than I do because I work in XYZ. You work in comms. Well, I'm here to tell you, you work in comms too. Do you remember what I told you earlier? That a lot of times many of us have been in a conversation, whether it's a think tank or it's a meeting with a boss or it's a focus group with coworkers, right? Sometimes they even bring in this contractor that's been hired to try to get to the root of all the problems in the agency, right? And what do we see that comes to the surface? It's communication. So Yes, you might not have the word communications in the title of the job that you do, but I assure you that if you are a leader, if you want to be a leader, or if you want to continue to be a leader, you're going to have to communicate on an extremely high level. And it starts with this: understanding your vision, mission, and core values. Well, I have another vision, mission, and core values. What is it? Well, it's the Public Health Service Commission core, right? And each of us have that too. So we always have that great opportunity to be able to communicate on multiple platforms, right? And to be able to communicate based on multiple things, right? So we really have two visions, we have two missions, and we have two sets of core values, right? We're one of what? Protect, promote, and advance the health and safety of our nation. Our nation, not or the nation, right? Okay. All right, so in the chat box, everybody go ahead and plug in what you think is most important about understanding the big picture. You might come up with 3, you might not. So I'm not asking you to plug in what your actual mission, vision, and core values are for your agency. I'm asking you, why is this important? I've kind of alluded to this, right? So I guess this is more like a pop quiz based on what I've already taught you. But what do you think? I want to hear what some of these answers are. Why do you think understanding the big picture is so important to your agency or for your career?
All right, so one individual says how my role tasks fit into the big picture. Another individual says, so we're moving in the same direction as a team. This is to know how to be heard when you are at the table with higher ups to get your own mission accomplished. Hopefully it aligns. To understand the purpose of our roles, tying in all that we do to the big picture, help prioritize skills. It puts purpose to the busy and got a thumbs up for that, and mission and goal oriented.
Nice. This is great. I don't know who picked this cohort for this leadership academy. And I have no visibility on what y'all did before this moment and what you're going to do afterwards, but your answers are spot on. You guys have a deeper understanding of why it's important to know the big picture, right? You got to understand why the agency exists. I know I make that sound really simple, but I heard some of the answers based on these 3 points, right? The purpose of the agency and how they conduct their daily work. I know that sounds simple, but it's easy to forget, right? Right? We go into this meeting or we go into this email, or we go into this conversation, and we're so focused on that tree, right? That obstacle that's right in front of us, and we forget the forest. We forget that big picture. We forget the whole, why does FDA exist? What is the purpose of FDA? And what's the daily work of the FDA, right? Just having those as reminders, you would be surprised how much that can affect the impact of how you communicate when you do go into that room with the senior level leader and you have to have a conversation. Okay. So now that we've talked about identifying the big picture and we've talked a little bit about how to use it or why to use it, let's talk about examples of how to use it. Well, look right here. I'm sharing with you an infographic that we created. Now, you might say, okay, I got it, Commander Meany. You work in comms, you create really cool infographics. That's not what my job is. I hear you loud and clear. But why am I using this example? Because a lot of times as government employees, we have to use what? Quantitative data, and you see that right here. At my agency, we keep track of how many physical exams, dental visits, prescriptions filled, urgent care visits, mental health interventions, sick calls, physical exams, intake screens. These are all numbers. It's data, You have data at your agency. But look closely at this. What do you see surrounding the data? What is all around it? What has surrounded it? Any guess? What do you see? You see the
Vision
data.
and mission put in the chat, core values.
Yeah. Yeah, you're seeing the big picture. It's surrounding it, right? It's more than just data, right? It's data that's aligned to the big picture, right? It's the connection. It's that shared approach to the big picture, right? So when your boss says, "Hey, Johnny, I need you to give me the numbers," right? Okay, fine. But think about it through the point of view of how are these numbers connected to the big picture? It's a visualization. Sometimes we have to verbalize, right? Sometimes we have to verbalize that big picture. It could come out in a meeting, right? You might even be asked a very pointed question from a colleague, and you might be looking at them like, seriously, our boss is in the room. You're going to throw me on the spot like this and ask me this kind of question? Those things happen, don't they? Sometimes it's your boss that asks you a pointed question, whether it's in a one-on-one or if it's with an audience, right? Even in these virtual worlds sometimes we live in, or at our desk, right? Your boss might come up and ask you a pointed question, but you're in a cube farm and you know everyone else can hear you, right? As soon as that happens, everyone turns their music down in their cubicles, right? Like, okay, let's see how Johnny's going to respond to this one, right? So when you have to verbalize your response to a pointed question, think about how you can include the big picture in it. Why? Because there's a good possibility that your boss is in regular meetings that involve the big picture. So when he asks you a question about the apple or about the orange, make your response somehow related to the agency, right? Not to yourself. And here's just one example for you.
David Welch, who is also from Wilmington, says it's been tough emotionally.
It's been a strain on everybody that's been displaced.
In the meantime, he's counting his blessings.
I'm real grateful that this is available, because otherwise it could have been a real chore to have the dialysis treatment that I require.
The teams providing care aren't looking too far ahead either.
We know that they will not be sent anywhere else until it's safe to go there. And until we hear from that, we focus on what our job is, which is care and compassion.
Just a little patience and acceptance goes a long way.
Okay. So let's break this down for a minute. You kind of got a summary of what this journalist question was, right? The journalist was basically asking me, how long are you going to be here, and why haven't you gotten these people out of here and off of these cots? Pretty pointed question. You agree? It's a legitimate question. Medical emergencies occur. This was an emergency response by the federal government. People are evacuated from their homes or living on cots in a mall, right? And a journalist point blank asked me, right, how long are they going to be here? Did anybody catch what my response was? Did anybody hear it? Put it in the chat box or say it verbally if you caught it.
A couple folks said that no one is going to leave or go home until folks that are there are safe.
Okay.
It also subtly says that you deeply care about the people that are there and they're just not a duty.
Ah. Okay, let's talk about this for a minute. Earlier, we talked about, I gave you an example of what my agency's vision, mission, and core values were at the ICE Health Service Corps, but then I reminded everyone, hey, we're all Public Health Service Commission Corps officers too. We have a second set of vision, mission, and core values, right? And we know the mission of the U.S. Public Health Service Commission Corps is to protect, promote, and advance the health and safety of our nation, or of the nation. And my response to a very pointed question from a journalist about why these people are still sleeping on cots was what? These were my exact words. We focused on what our job is, which is care and compassion. See, I bring it back to the big picture, right? We have healthcare providers and we have support roles of healthcare providers providing care and compassion, right? We care about the health and safety of the people in our nation. right? So that's where the focus was. And I just give this as an example to each of you because there are going to come times when you're going to realize that communicating with impact might have to occur on the spot. And you might not have that opportunity to really think it through. Or the exact opposite might happen, where it comes to you in an email and you have time to respond. When you do, I want you to make sure that if the opportunity to visualize the big picture is there, or if the opportunity to verbalize the big picture is there in your response, it can only help with your impact in the way you're communicating as a leader now and as a leader tomorrow. Okay. So we have already covered the first bullet. Remember, we're only going to cover 3 things today, right? Remember I said there are 3 takeaways. We're already at number 2, making the pitch. Are we talking about baseball? I mean, it is spring. I mean, didn't the spring season just open, right? I know every single one of you is just like me. You're all excited about the Chicago Cubs, right? We won the World Series in 2016. We waited our whole lives for this. And we're hoping for a repeat, right? Many of us thought we would die and never see our beloved Chicago Cubs win. So we all feel the same way, right? That's what this is about, making the pitch, that first pitch. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but that's not the pitch we're talking about, right? In fact, we're talking about knowing your audience. We're talking about a bluff background, and we're talking about next steps. Okay. Know your audience. Well, I just gave you an example of how important it is to know the audience. In fact, I'm willing to bet that the majority of the people, I don't want to admit this, but probably the majority of the people in this room are not Chicago Cubs fans like myself. Now I am. My license plate even says Cubs 16 because it was the greatest year in my entire life, except when my children were born, was to see the Chicago Cubs win the World Series. But see, it's important that you know your audience, right? You can't assume that everyone else feels the same way you do. And why is that so important? Well, if you really know your audience, you understand them. But why is it important to know your audience? Well, if you really want to communicate on an extremely high level, you've taken the time to understand the audience you're going to be speaking to, whether verbally or through email or through a document. And you're going to make sure that the content that you create is going to resonate with them. Why do I say that? It goes back to what I said at the very beginning. Remember when I said, all right, someone might have to help me in figuring out how to do this chat box because I want to be able to connect with you, right? I want to be able to engage with you. Well, then I also mentioned to you that we live in this world with these phones where we just go like this on a phone and look at stuff, right? And we're getting information that only lasts about 7 seconds. And we go on to the next thing. And that information only lasts 3 to 7 seconds. That's the world we live in. How am I going to connect with you? How am I going to get to that deeper level with you? How am I truly going to communicate with you on a higher level in an impactful way? I have to be able to speak to you in a way that resonates with you. How do I do that? I know you. Now, is that hard to do? Yeah. You might be like, all right, Muni, I get it. Okay, fine. But I have to write this document. I don't know who's going to look at this at my agency. Oh, what was the key phrase? At the agency. What does everyone at the agency have? A bridge, right? We're all linked together. There's a common purpose. It's that shared big picture. So when you verbalize the response, or when you write an email, or when you write that document, or that action plan, think about that bridge. Think about that common ground. Think about how you can really resonate with your audience on that deeper level. Okay. So clearly we've established the fact that the pitch is not throwing a baseball. What is the pitch? It's a proposal, right? It can come in the form of an email, or it could be that one-on-one meeting that you have with your supervisor. It might even be with a colleague or a group of colleagues on your team to talk about something. You want to make that pitch. Here's a way to do it. It's not the only way. I'm just telling you a way to do it. Do the bluff. All right. So in the chat box, tell me 2 things. Tell me what bluff stands for. That's the easy one. Tell me the hard one. What does it really mean? Tell me what that means. Give you a few seconds to think about how you want to type that in. And if you don't know what bluff is, just wait a second. Someone else is going to put the answer in and you'll see it. That's
Someone
okay,
already
too.
contributed it. The bottom
Okay.
line up front.
Bottom line up front. What does it mean though? What does that really mean?
We have getting to the overall point in the first couple sentences, succinct message up front to give the ask. Get to the point.
Yeah. That's right.
Bluff means putting first what the ask is, don't waste time. Bluff is dancing around the issue and not really addressing it. Apply a good BS filter. Bottom line up front, put most important details first. Makes messages clear and quick.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Yeah, bottom line up front, beginning with the key information, right? It's that idea of, I want to talk to you about apples today. And this is the course of action for dealing with apples, right? It's giving that information right up front. Some of you might be like, okay, yeah, I get it. This seems a little adolescent. Why are we having this talk? I'll tell you why. Well, kind of like how we have phones with these awesome cameras, so we all think we're professional cameramen and camera women, right? I know we all do, don't we? We got all these great filters we can put on here. You know, nobody can take a picture as good as us because we have these awesome phones, right? Well, same thing holds true with email. I've written all these emails. I'm the best at writing emails. I know how to do this. I'm going to tell a story. Who's ever seen an email like that? Long-winded. Many of you get multiple emails a day. And I don't mean 5, 10, 15. I'm talking 50 to 100 emails a day. You have to prioritize, right? You get to all the emails, but you have to put first things first, especially as a leader. Get to the key emails first. And when there's an email that's written like Gone with the Wind or this huge, long novel or the longest musical ever scripted, what happens immediately? It's not resonating with you. This person that wrote it doesn't understand you.
So we got a
You don't
couple
have-
comments in the chat, so pardon
Go
me for
ahead.
interrupting.
Go ahead.
Got one is email kind of sucks as a form of communication with the heart. Someone also contributed a heart to that. And then someone also contributed War and Peace.
Yeah.
That's speaking to the length of things.
Yeah, War and Peace, so true. So I like both comments. And let me jump to the first one. You're right. Unfortunately, email has turned into communication, but it lacks pitch, tone, emotion. It lacks all the nonverbals, right? Many of you are looking at me on the screen right now, and you see that I have ability to get into my words with expressions in my hands, right? And I try to be charismatic when I say things and use dramatic pauses, right? That's part of public speaking. You don't get that with email. So what is email? Well, whoever wrote that's right. It's a way to send and receive information, right? It's not a true form of communication, but unfortunately, it's what we rely on many times to do our job, isn't it? So we're going to talk about how to do our very best to communicate through the platforms that we are asked to use at work, right? Because at the end of the day, I don't want this training to be about, in a perfect world, we would all meet in a room and I would make that pitch to you face to face. Because unfortunately, that just doesn't happen anymore, right? Hopefully you can make your pitch with your camera on like this, and that's the best case scenario. But we're going to cover them both, right? And even if your camera's on, you have that virtual meeting with someone and you make the pitch, you can still start with that bottom line up front, right? You can still start with beginning with that key information. Okay, here's an example. We're proposing that fresh fruit be offered in the break room. It's an alternative snack to those vending machines. Why? To promote a healthier workforce at our agency. That's the bluff. That's the bottom line up front. What's the connection to the big picture? Is it in there? Is there an alignment back to what the mission is? Could there be? Does anyone see it?
overall health and, I guess, welfare of the agency.
Yeah, promoting a healthier workforce, right? So somebody's coming to the boss with this pitch. Fresh fruit in the break room. What's the background? Wow, these vending machines have a bunch of junk food in them. They're not good for us. We want healthy options because the current behavior is in contrast to the agency's mission, vision, and core values. And I threw in the one for the public health service, since we're all public health service officers, of protecting, promoting, and advancing the health and safety of our nation. Took it a step farther in the background, right? Recent focus groups resulted at our agency talked about people actually want to bring in a basket of fresh fruit on a recurring basis. So people want to do this. And part of this whole pitch was, well, HR even said there's no policy against it. And people can do this if they want to. Now, I know this example is very simple. Why? Because, well, we only have an hour and a half with each other today. And we're not going to get that far in the weeds on what some of these things are and what some of these possible pitches could be. But I want you to see the basic fundamentals. We started with the bluff, right? We want to put fruit in the break room. We're tired of just having junk to choose from. But then from there, we went into the background, right? So we grabbed the boss's attention. All right, fine. You want fruit. I got it. Okay. Now you give them a little background. It's all high calorie, high sugar snacks. It's in contrast to our mission. We've even asked people, they want to do this. And HR's on board with it. Okay. You might actually have the boss's attention now, right? So next steps, right? Every good pitch starts with the bluff that has the background, but it has to end with something. It has to end with what? The next steps. So go ahead and put it in the chat box. What do you think the next steps on this particular scenario is? Johnny suggested, hey, we want fresh fruit in the break room. He gave the background. How should Johnny finish this pitch? What's the ending?
We have provide suggestions for accomplishing the task or ask, closing the deal, offer recommendations or a way forward, and a couple feasible ideas.
I like that. Okay. That could be the case. I love the optimism in this classroom. That's awesome. Well, Johnny's got to be prepared for his boss to just sit and listen and show absolutely no emotion, to show no hint of agreeing to the fruit baskets coming in. Johnny's got to have a plan, right? And that's what every good pitch has. Be prepared for worst case scenario, okay? Be prepared that you're not going to get the answer that you want, but instead you get no answer, right? So a lot of times what I do is when I throw a pitch, and I call it a pitch, I love to throw pitches at leaders. I love doing this mainly because I like a good challenge, right? But in my pitch, if I feel like they're on board with this, yes, I will do exactly what some of those suggestions were in the chat box. But if that boss is just sitting there and giving me nothing, right? Like we both have our cameras on or we're both in person and he's just giving me absolutely nothing. And I'm like, okay, I got it. You are not throwing me a bone. You want to sit on this. Okay, no problem. End it with this. I'd like to schedule a meeting very soon, maybe in the next couple of weeks, after you've had a chance to consider this. And when we have that meeting, I hope that you bring me good news. And if you do, I want you to know that I'm going to have a plan for action with the timeline laid out with a proposal on how to implement it, right? So you're telling in the pitch what that bluff was up front. You gave the background, but it doesn't just drop off there, right? A good pitch has that closer, right? It closes the loop on what the next step is. Supervisors will appreciate that, whether they agree with the fruit basket or not. Okay. covered 2 of the 3 takeaways already, right? The first one was understanding the big picture. And the second one was the pitch. All right, the last one. This one is my favorite. Communicating strategically. Now, full disclosure, everyone on my team at work has a book that is shipped to their home the moment they get hired to work on the strategic comms team. And it's titled Strategic Communications. It's a huge textbook. And every new employee on the team reads it, cover to cover. There's a lot. We could spend days talking about what strategic communications means and how it fits into the bigger picture of communicating for impact. It really is that final piece to understanding the big picture, doing the pitch, and then being able to communicate this strategically. But we don't have that much time. So, in a few words, put in the chat box what you think strategic communications means.
And please ignore the little bubble that popped up that said there's 5 minutes left to the meeting. That's not the case. There's just, I had set the alternate meeting link to an hour, but it should not interrupt anything. All right, we've got one comment in the chat so far. It says, communicate the right message to the right people at the right time and ensuring the right message was received.
Okay, that's good.
We have best path forward to achieve the goal, making strong connection of the big picture targeted audience in the ask, communicating effectively, communication that aims to achieve a goal. It is clear, direct, professional, and brief, clear and concise, COM, I'm not sure what that acronym stands for, sorry. Planned, deliberate communication, and aligning communication with the big picture.
Okay. These are good. I appreciate y'all engaging. This is good. Here's the most simplistic way to put it. And of course, if the people that worked on my team were listening right now, they'd be like, there is so much more complex than this. And it is. But we can really sum it up into this, right? It's that specialized approach to distribute and receive information. And I heard some of that in your answer. So that's why I wanted to stop and just acknowledge that and thank you for your responses, because I could hear that your responses, they align with that most basic function of what strategic communications is, right? It's that specialized approach. It's not always the same thing every time, right? Like we all prefer to engage differently, right? Like some of you learn visually, some of you learn through listening, some of you learned through reading, right? And sometimes that then stems to the way we communicate, right? Many of us prefer to communicate through very specific and specialized platforms, and that's okay. And something that I love about strategic communications is, you know, we can create something and send it out, and we can measure it and find that it was received by many, many people. But strategic communications teaches us that we don't all receive information the same way. And sometimes you have to communicate it in multiple different ways across multiple different platforms to really expand the net and that catchment area of people that are able to receive that information. So that's the most basic way that I can explain strategic communications to you. You know, I mentioned to you a minute ago, you know, a lot of us prefer different ways to communicate. Here are 8 examples. Go ahead and put in the chat box what you think is the most impactful platform on there out of those choices. What do you think? Put it in the chat box. Now, there's a key though, as your role in public health. So I'm not referring to that special cooking show that you've created for the whole world to see your recipes on how you cook the perfect chocolate cake. No, I'm talking about in your role as a public health leader, as a health services category commission corps officer in the public health service, which platform on here do you think you use in order to be the most impactful in your attempt to communicate with others? What are some of the answers?
One person said that they're too old to know what all of those are. We've got Twitter, Teams,
Okay.
Facebook, Instagram. There's no winner yet. Email or Teams.
Okay.
So I think we got all of them.
Okay.
Oh, the in logo is for LinkedIn, for the person who asked.
Okay. Thank
We
you.
heard the platforms that allow video, Facebook, social media, including LinkedIn, conference presentations, email or Teams.
Yeah. Yep. Email or Teams, right? So as your role in public health, I'm assuming that most of the people on this call, it's either Teams or email. When it comes to your role in public health, right? These are the two platforms that you use to send and receive information. So let's just talk quickly about those two in particular, email and Teams. So back in the day, before email was actually a thing, we used to have these things called memos, right? And they would come out from the agency, and sometimes they'd be in these really big special binders, and they get sent around to all these people to check the grammar and what word's going to be used, and then it finally makes it to the director's office, right? And then they sign off on it, and then what happens? Well, then it gets printed on this photocopier machine, right? And then these memos are distributed, right? I'm not saying that doesn't happen anymore, but it's been replaced by email, right? And what we're doing is we're still creating these memos, but they come out through this distribution platform as email. And you might say, okay, you kind of waste a little bit of time giving that scenario about the memo. I would argue I didn't. Why? Because as soon as you click send on an email, you've lost complete control. That dramatic pause was intentional. Think about what you're putting in an email. Think about who you're sending it to. Realize that that email is owned by the US government, and your rights to it are extremely limited to about nothing. It's an official use of sending and receiving information, just like that memo. So we need to be very cognizant about what we put in an email. And unfortunately, it doesn't show pitch and tone, and it can be misinterpreted so easily. So we have to be very careful in how we write. Now, this class isn't about how to make sure you don't do things the wrong way. This class is about how to make sure you're impactful in the way you communicate. But I really wanted to make sure I started with making sure you fully embrace how official an email can be and is. Let's talk about the other one, Teams. I love Teams, right? And you just got to get that information quickly from somebody, and you just don't feel like writing an email, and you're afraid it's going to end up in this big lost in the sauce of someone's inbox. You just hit them real quick with that Teams message, right? So that Teams message is very much like when you were working at your cubicle or in your office and you didn't have your door shut, and somebody just popped in and started talking to you and asking you a question before they even asked how your day is. That's kind of what Teams is, right? You're in the middle of doing something, and then pop, in that bottom right-hand corner, this Teams message comes up. It's like a virtual version of somebody that just popped up with their head over your cubicle and starts talking to you. So be careful on what you put in Teams. But let's go back to the emails. We can use this to our advantage. So what's the right way to write an email? Okay. I know some of you right now might be rolling your eyes thinking, are you kidding me? I was so excited to join the Health Services Leadership Academy. And when I saw that Communicating for Impact was on here, I was thinking, okay, this could be good use of my time. And for some of you, that thought might have just escaped your mind when you hit slide 26. And that's okay. Just give me a second. Don't give up on me. Give me a chance to reel you back in. Because I know some of you might be thinking, I've probably wrote 10,000 more emails than you'll ever think of writing. Who are you to tell me how to write an email? Well, I want to show you how much impact an email can have. Now, yes, I could spend hours talking about communicating strategically, and I wish I could, but I can't because I only have so much time and I want to make sure I get these 3 takeaways. So I decided the best thing to do is to give you an example of just how impactful an email can really be. So what are really those 5 components that every email should have? Well, it should have a salutation or a greeting, right? Good morning, comma, Commander Johnny, comma, right? That's your salutation, your greeting, right? And then you go into your intro, and then there's that body, there's that bluff, there's that background, and then there's that closer, right? You got to close the pitch, right? What's the next steps? And you have to reiterate that action or that deadline. And then it's important that your signature block not only has that agency disclaimer, right? We talked about how this is official communication, but we want to make sure that you have the right contact information in there so somebody can reach out to you, okay? So some of you are like, okay, yeah, I get it, but you still haven't reeled me back in. Stay with me. I'm still trying, all right? Here's my example to you. Not that long ago, I was sitting on a fold-out chair on a fold-out table with my laptop, and I wrote an email to the OSH. This was the bluff. I interviewed the sister of a confirmed Ebola patient at the Monrovia Medical Unit. She made an impactful statement authorized for public use that communicates a story about care and compassion, aligned with our government's mission at the Ebola treatment unit. Okay, bottom line up front, do you get it? I think everyone gets it. Did I show the big picture? What's the big picture? Can anyone identify it? What's the big picture here in the bluff? Type it in the chat box. Anyone see what
We
the big
have
picture is? Go
the
ahead.
government's mission being met.
Yeah, I mentioned care and compassion. Talk about alignment with the government's mission at the Ebola treatment unit, right?
Yeah. Also have the sister's story supports PHS mission, care and compassion a couple times.
Okay, all right. How long is this bluff? How many sentences is it? 2. It's pretty short, right? Some of you might think, how could a bluff be this impactful? How did this actually turn into anything decent? Your bluff is only 2 sentences. Remember, a bluff is very short, right? And every word is thought about. The audience is thought about. Did I know my audience when I wrote this? Did I know who it was going to at the OSH? Did I know how to make that connection with them? Did I know how to make sure that I could have this resonate with them on a deeper level? Would I get their attention? Here was the background that was included in that email. A woman named Courage Walker. She came to the Ebola treatment unit on multiple occasions to visit her sister Rachel while she recovered from Ebola. Courage said, "We were worried at first, but when we found out Rachel was being transferred to the American Ebola treatment unit, we thanked God first, and then we thanked America second for caring about us." That's impactful, right? That was the background. I'll give you a little bit more. I was there at the Ebola treatment unit in 2014, and I saw this woman named Courage Walker. She would show up on the back of a moped, and then the moped would leave. So that was interesting. And then she would walk over to this covered area with a fence, and she would sing songs to her sister Rachel across the fence, and she would have the biggest smile on her face, and she'd be giving her words of encouragement. And I stood at a distance and I watched this for several days in a row. And her sister would leave, and Rachel would say very few words, very quiet. But Courage kept coming back. Always showed up on a moped and always left on a different moped someone else was driving. So after several days, I asked her. I waited for her to finish with her sister. Obviously, that's a private moment. And she was walking back to the moped. I told her who I was, and I asked her if I could talk to her. And I ended up interviewing her. And when I got through a 30-minute interview, that 30 minutes came down to this bluff and this background. Now remember, the bluff had 2 sentences, and the background has what? 2 sentences, right? So 30 minutes of work came down to 4 sentences, 2 in a bluff and 2 in a background.
At the Monrovia Medical Unit in Liberia, built by American troops, staffed by Rear Admiral Giberson and his team from the U.S. Public Health Service Corps. A nurse's aide named Rachel Walker went in for treatment and left Ebola free. And I want you to listen to what Rachel's sister said about all of you. We were worried at first, she said, but when we found out Rachel was being transferred to the American Ebola Treatment Unit, we thanked God first, and then we thanked America second for caring about us. And the Americans who she was speaking of aren't just doctors or nurses or soldiers or scientists. You're what one lieutenant commander from the U.S. Public Health Service Corps called the hope multipliers.
Okay. So an email with 4 sentences has the ability to be impactful, right? We start with a bluff. We make sure that big picture is in there. We provide that background, and then we make sure it's being distributed in a very specialized way, right? That's that strategic approach, right? And I kind of gave you a little bit of a background, right? It started with this message. That's Rachel on the right, smiling, hugging. I'm sorry, that's Courage on the right, hugging her sister Rachel. Courage is the one smiling with the big smile. And my point to this is I want to make sure that you realize that you don't have to be an admiral. You don't have to be a captain. You could have been a lieutenant like I was that just knew how to write a good email, that knew the importance of getting that bottom line up front and how to align it with the big picture of your audience to make sure you're speaking in the language of the people that you're speaking to. That's how you connect with your audience, right? And you can take something as simple as a 30-minute interview next to a moped outside of Monrovia, Liberia, and through an email, you can get it to the President of the United States. It can happen. And if anyone ever tells you it can't, you can tell them it did. I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for taking leadership into your own hands. It's a big deal. You know, a lot of times people think that you got to wait until you're in a leadership role to be a leader. And I would argue it's too late. You have to lead from where you are if you want to lead from somewhere else tomorrow. And a lot of it comes to the way you communicate and the way that you connect with your audience. I hope I was able to connect with you today. I hope you felt that this was engaging. I hope you walked away with those 3 takeaways, right? Understanding that big picture and how to use it. Being able to make that pitch and realizing that strategic communications is all about that specialized approach on how you can distribute and receive information. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions that you may have.
There are a couple comments, questions in the chat, so I'm going to start there, and then as people raise their hands, we can call on them. So one officer said, "That drove it home, sir. Thank you." Another individual said, "Do you recommend any books to read regarding strategic communication?" Someone else said, "Thank you. That was extremely powerful." And again, questions about resources to assist with communication.
Yeah. Well, you're very welcome. And thank you for your feedback. In fact, I'm going to recommend the book that I purchased for everybody that ends up deciding to work in strategic comms in the team that I have the esteemed privilege to lead. I make sure every single one of them gets a copy of it. And, hold on one second. I want to make sure I just give you the right link.
So for those of you who don't know Commander Muni, he is a master. I first deployed with him, I think, for Hurricane Sandy, and he was the PIO for that and masterfully handled a lot of chaos and messages and everything coming at him, and has a very robust portfolio of print media and photos and spoken words. So really appreciative that you could come and speak to us today.
You're welcome. Not a problem at all. Okay. Well, this isn't working out as well as I wanted it to. Fortunately, I have everyone's email address on here, and I know I can get it to everyone. Give me one more second. I'll try to see if I can. There's one in particular, and of course I'm on my government computer right now, so they're not going to let me look at anything, because I'm sure you can understand that. But I will definitely follow back up, probably within about 15 to 20 minutes. I'm just going to have to go off a VPN to be able to pull that up, and then I'll be able to provide that link to y'all, so that way you can have it. But most importantly, I just want to say thank you for somebody asking that. That's great news. I always feel like anytime somebody wants to get better at communicating more strategically, it's a step in the right direction. So thank you. I really appreciate y'all's time. And with that, I wish you best of luck in the rest of your academy, and you'll have an amazing day. Thank you.
Oh, we do have one hand
Go
that
ahead, question.
was just raised.
Yes.
Officer Demers, did you have your hand up? Sorry, I didn't catch your ring.
Oh, I think I was just trying to put the clappy.
Okay.
You got it this time. Good job. All right, thank you, everyone. I'm going to stop the recording now. Again, thank you. Round of applause for Commander Muni. And we will see each other on the 18th of April. Thank you all.